Has the Prime Minister provided you with a full list of all of his investments with Brookfield?
No.
How are you able to, do you have the list?
I have the list that is, I'm as the administrator to the wall, the ethical wall. I am responsible for the administration of the wall as agreed upon by the Commissioner of Ethics and the Prime Minister. So the list that I obey from is the Annex A to the public declaration made by the Prime Minister.
So do you have full visibility on all of the investments in the Global Transition Fund and all of Brookfield's investments?
As I said, the Commissioner of Ethics and the Prime Ministers have agreed that actually the appropriate measures for the Prime Minister upon his election was two things: that he would divest of his investments through a blind trust, and that actually, as an additional preventive measure, an ethical wall would be set up. And there's a list at the Annex A of the companies that actually are, in a preventive way, could be the object of a wall if necessary.
A couple of things, sir. First of all, when Canadians hear that the Prime Minister has divested, what they expect is that there's been a sale of those controlled assets. I appreciate that within the law as it's currently written, that placing them in a blind trust satisfies that requirement, as that's what the Ethics Commissioner has said. However, the funds like the Global Transition Fund and future payments to Mr. Carney based on the performance of Brookfield create a scenario where it seems to me that the only way you could effectively ensure that the Prime Minister isn't making decisions that benefit Brookfield or himself financially would be for you to have the full list of the investments and interests in the Global Transition Fund and in Brookfield's portfolio.
I'll just refer you to actually a comment made by Nigel Wright in front of this committee, and Nigel Wright, who was the Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister, and where similar measures were applied in this case. There were actually, he had to divest of his assets in a blind trust, and there were 40 companies that were screened in that context. It's kind of the similar measures that we see here. And at the time, Mr. Wright, who was who became the Chief of Staff of Prime Minister Harper, said, he talked about his blind trust and about the blind trust. He said that the blind trust follows a form that was created and drafted by the Ethics Commissioner, as in the case of the Prime Minister here. He said, I transferred all of my control assets in the blind trust in late October. The blind trustee is the legal owner of them all now, and I'm not to have any communication of any sort, no direction, no advice, no information about what's in there. I do not know and will not know what's in there. Once a quarter, I'll be told what the value of it is. So he said there's a direct link between the Ethics Commissioner and the blind trustee, so that the Ethics Commissioner office will have the ability to know what's going on. But the purpose of the blind trust is to remove me and any knowledge I may have about my controlled investments and have them administered by a third party. It's exactly the same kind of situation that you have with Prime Minister Carney.
If I may, sir, I appreciate that it may be similar, but the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister is not the Prime Minister. And the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister does not have the ability to take the decisions and does not have the influence that the Prime Minister has. The situation also appears to be different because with Brookfield's investments in, all of the things that the government is committing major government spending to, whether it's artificial intelligence or modular housing or heat pumps, the Prime Minister's future payments depend on Brookfield's performance. And that's not something that's going to be sold by the trustee. That's something that went in and something that's going to come out looking the same way. The Prime Minister knows what he put into and what the investments were of Brookfield when he was chair at Brookfield Asset Management. He created the funds that he's going to benefit from based on their performance. Canadians are the ones who are in the dark about the decisions that the Prime Minister is taking and how they're going to impact his potential future compensation. So it's a lack of transparency that gives rise to this concern. And my recommendation, I don't come with a problem without a proposed solution. And would you not say that in this situation, it would give Canadians the confidence that they can have that the decisions aren't being taken with the perception of personal financial gain if the Prime Minister, if anyone holding the office of Prime Minister were to divest it by selling before taking decisions, instead of placing them in a blind trust where they're still able to know what they put in.